This video is brought to you by Podcasting for Professionals, a premium online course for professionally minded people who believe the quality of your production should match the quality of your content. Preview some free lessons and learn more at audio101.info. So, the top half, anything above the line is considered a breath. The bottom half, anything above the line is considered not a breath. Okay, you understand why people don't know how to dial this in? Okay. Hey, Brian Miller here, and welcome to Audio for Content Creators, where we help you sound better and level up for all your content creation needs. This has been my most requested video, I think, ever on this channel. It's a tutorial of the Waves DeBreath plugin. And the reason it's taken me so long to get to this, no matter how many times it's been requested, is because I really didn't feel like making it. I really don't like this plugin. I don't like working with it, and I really just don't use it. I demoed it though in a previous video, which I'll link up here, when I was doing an audio critique of somebody's podcast who had sent me this file, and he had a pre-existing medical condition that makes his breaths extra loud, extra wheezy, and he was looking for an automatic way to take care of it. In that case, a plugin like Waves DeBreath is definitely going to help, but typically I recommend going through and either manually removing the breaths, improving your microphone technique, or simply using something like a straightforward expander. There's so many different ways to do it, and a lot of people seem to want a tutorial on this, and once I started digging into it, it was no surprise why. I mean, go ahead, look at this. Look at this right here. Setting the threshold. This is from the DeBreath user manual. As explained earlier, the breath rating is a statistical figure derived from a template matching algorithm. I mean, what in the actual heck is Waves writing into this manual? Nobody can figure out how to use this thing, and because I got some decent results with it in that previous video, so here I am in Studio One. Of course, you can use this in any digital audio workstation that allows third-party VSTs, and I have just a little cutout section, a tiny little cutout section of a recent video I made for my Thursday Thoughts series on my main channel, Brian Miller, author, speaker, magician. Let's just listen to a couple of the breaths as they're coming out. When Gene Wilder first sang those words in the 1971 film, very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only $2 million. Critics were split. Roger Ebert raved. All right, you get the idea. You see that I've already made some markers just for us on where these kind of breaths were. There's a very deep breath right there. There's a shallow breath right here, and I'll deal with this quiet S a little bit later. So now let me show you what a DeBreath setting dialed in properly sounds like in this case. So just to remind you, okay, this is DeBreath off. Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only $2 million. Critics were split. And now, DeBreath on. Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only $2 million. Critics were split. And one more time, off. Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, Okay, so we can even just listen right just to this one. Off. Contrary to popular belief, and on. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not. So these are the settings that I'm using in order to make that happen. And let me explain a few different things about what we're looking at here, and then I'm going to load up a brand new version of DeBreath on here, and we're going to work from scratch from the default settings to achieve what I just did. So what you're looking at it's seemingly simple plugin. It doesn't look like there's that many things going on. There's a slider here. There's a reduction slider here. There's a slider here. Fade out, fade in, monitor, room tone. There's really not that much, except these are incredibly complicated algorithms that are not at all intuitive. So let's talk through what each one of them is doing and why I'm approaching each one the way that I am. In order to do that, I'm going to call up a new instance of DeBreath. So this is how it shows up. when it's brand new. I'm just going to adjust the wave so we can kind of see everything all at once. Okay, great. Let's just turn the loop off for a second here. What we're looking at here is there's a breath, there's a breath. So let's just start with those two. In fact, I'll make it so it's all kind of centered on the screen right there. Here's a really deep one where I go, and here's a shallow one, something like that. If I just play this plugin on, it's on right now. If I play it with its default settings, it sounds like this.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only $2 million. Critics were split. Roger Ebert.
There's something you'll notice right away. It completely eliminated this first breath, and it did not even touch this second breath. And that is where this plugin gets tricky. So let's take a look at the plugin itself. The top of it is called breath. The bottom is called energy. Essentially, this plugin is like a gate. You're going to approach it like you would a gate or an expander. And as I have noted many times in many videos, gates are one of the worst tools in digital audio. They are a holdover from the analog world that serve very little purpose, at least in spoken word. They're very, very useful in music for gating kick drums and toms and snares and things like that, when there's all kinds of other music going on where you're not going to hear the sharp, crude nature of a gate. But a gate is just open or closed. It lets audio through or it doesn't. This is essentially a gate. And as such, you're going to get a somewhat crude sound. Okay, let's start with the top of it, the breath. Well, first of all, this is your threshold. Just like a gate or a compressor or an expander, you're going to choose at what point, at what decibel level, how quiet or how loud, essentially. It's not really quiet and loud, but at what decibel level should the gate clamp down on the breath. So how loud is the signal? How quiet is the signal at which you want the gate for the breath to clamp down? Let me give you an example of what this is doing. So let's go completely to 0.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only $2 million. Critics were split. Roger Ebert raved, probably the best film of its sort, The Wizard of Oz.
So you can hear that it's way, way, way too aggressive when it's all the way down at 0. And when we kick it all the way up to 100, it won't do anything.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only...
And the reason it's not doing anything is because look at what it's doing. Look at this line right here. This is the threshold line that you are manipulating. Anything that goes above that line, essentially, is going to be subject to this gate. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get just the breaths and the breaths alone above that line. So if we lower this down to somewhere around maybe 46, we should notice that this breath gets caught.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not...
Did you hear how this breath right here was completely eliminated because it was above the threshold?
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing...
So we understand what the threshold does. You're trying to set the threshold at the level where any of your breaths are caught, but the standard spoken word is not. Over here, we've got a reduction slider. How much breath reduction do you want to do? At the moment, the native setting, the default setting is negative infinity. It is eliminating the breaths, which I think sounds really weird because breaths are a natural part of speech. We hear people breathing as they talk. It's part of, it's like, if you eliminate all the breaths, you get this kind of uncanny valley effect. Like the uncanny valley is when we refer to computer animation creating human-like characters, that if you make it really close to looking like a real human, but not quite, your brain just gets really frustrated. It's like all the CGI replacements in the recent Star Wars movies where they're using, like Princess Leia, right? So after Carrie Fisher had passed and then they still used her in the next movie, you're watching it and there was a face replacement and a still image, it looks perfect. It's definitely her. but there was just something a little off as you're watching it because it's so close to perfect, but it's not actually real and your brain is triggered and you don't even know why it feels weird to you. This is essentially the audio version of the uncanny valley as far as I'm concerned. You don't hear any breaths and it's just something is unnatural about that and you can't put your finger on it, and it's because you're used to hearing people breathing. The goal is here though that when you're talking, like when I was recording this, I was talking into a microphone like you would for podcasting. I'm not using this right now. I'm using an overhead mic, so it sounds a little bit more roomy, more natural. But if I were using this right here, you would get that super unnaturally close podcast radio sound. And so if I'm talking this close to a microphone and I breathe in, even normal breaths can sound way over accentuated because we're not used to having our ear 3 inches away from somebody's mouth while they're talking, right? That's essentially what I'm doing when I place a microphone 3 inches from my mouth, is I'm putting your ear, the listener, 3 inches from my mouth. So we hear all those extra, the mouth noises, and that's the downside to doing a really close mic'd kind of a setup like that, as opposed to using an overhead mic or a boom mic, which is a little bit more natural. It's further away, more like you might hear in the real world. I know it seems like I'm going on a tangent, but this is really important when you're dialing in plugins like this. Okay, let's instead of going to minus infinity, let's just reduce the breath by, let's say, 12 decibels. So 6 dB, 6 decibels is roughly twice as loud. 12 decibels would be roughly 4 times as loud. So by reducing the breath by 12 decibels, we're basically making the breath a quarter as loud, okay? So let's hear what happens now to this big breath right there.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success.
And you actually see the reduction meter kick in right here as that happens. So let's listen to it with it off and then on. Here's off.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief,
hear how loud and aggressive that breath was? Now listen.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not.
See, that's like a normal breath kind of a sound. Maybe we want to go one step further and go to minus 18. Let's just work in 6 decibel increments now, because at least in our head we can go, all right, twice as quiet, one more time, twice as quiet, an eighth as loud as the original. Listen.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was.
And that, to me, is a really good spot, because now you hear the breath, and so you feel like it's a real person. It sounds natural, but it's not pronounced and right up in your face. So again, here's the difference, off and then on.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief.
Really aggressive, now on.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief,
and that has a natural sound. Okay, so that is the breath section, this whole thing at the top. Now let's go look at the energy section. So the energy is, and it even tells you here it's a gate. The energy, so if we're trying to make sure that anything above the threshold for the breath gets captured, for the energy, it's the opposite. Any event whose energy lies above the threshold will not be considered a breath. Okay, you see, this is the opposite. Anything above the energy threshold will not be considered a breath. In other words, if an event, an audio event, has more energy, according to waves, then wherever this threshold is set, if it has more energy, it will not be a breath. So the top half, anything above the line is considered a breath. The bottom half, anything above the line is considered not a breath. Okay, you understand why people don't know how to dial this in? Okay, so here is the problem. Let's go listen to, with the current settings, let it play through for a second. You'll hear this deep breath here, which we already took care of. Listen to what happens to this shallow breath and then this quiet S that happens all the way over here. Ready?
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a commercial success, grossing only $2 million. Critics were split. Roger Ebert raved, probably the best film of its sort since The Wizard of Oz.
Okay, so what did we just discover? This deep breath, awesome. This shallow breath, awesome. It took care of both of those beautifully. But then way over here, there was an S. There's an S right here. Let's listen with it off to what it actually sounds like.
The best film of its sort since The Wizard of Oz.
See, there was a quiet S. It was since. the best film of its sort, and you actually hear the S in the word right before it, that S made it through, but this S of its sort, so you'll hear film of its sort makes it through, but since doesn't, because since was quieter. Listen.
Film of its sort since The Wizard of Oz.
Did you hear that S on since because I said it quieter? It just was below the energy threshold. And so, I'm sorry, it was just below the energy threshold. So what we need to do is push the energy threshold until we figure out how to pull it. We're going to pull it down, essentially. It starts at -30 as its default. We're going to pull it down until that S gets through. So let's just pull it down to like -33.
Film of its sort since The Wizard of Oz.
All right, so it just needed an extra couple of decibels of space. And now that little S is pushing enough energy to cross this threshold for energy here. In other words, anything I want to let through needs to push above the energy threshold. Anything I want to capture as a breath has to go above the breath threshold. And you got to get these working in tandem, and this can take a little bit of time. This can be some trial and error. It's not easy to dial in this plugin. And you know, this is just a 10-second, 20-second clip of audio. If you get 90 minutes of audio or something that you got to go through, like an hour-long podcast or a 90-minute podcast, or gosh forbid, 2 to 3 hours, it could be really hard to know you've dialed this in and you've never really missed anything. And I'm going to talk about a way around that in just a second. There's 2 more things that you need to know about here. For now, let's just ignore fade in and fade out because that's incredibly fine tuning. And honestly, if you get these 3 sliders working well together, the breath threshold, the energy threshold, and the reduction threshold, the reduction slider, you're in good shape. But if you need to, you can always come down here to monitor and click breath instead of voice. And all you'll hear are the things being captured by DeBreath. So let me show you what I mean. That was a nice little quiet moment, wasn't it? In other words, if you click breath for monitor, you're monitoring just the breath. So it's letting you hear what it is taking out. And so you can listen and make sure that you're not hearing any of your words, any of your normal speech being taken out by the plugin, which is actually a really useful tool. Lastly, room tone, on or off. Room tone, if you turn this on, it's going to replace the breath. Anytime it takes something out, a breath out, it's going to replace it with just a little bit of white noise at the bottom of the signal so that you don't get any hard cuts the way a traditional gate might. This is a really, really clever thing they built into this because that's the biggest problem with a gate, a normal gate, is that you would get these really strange sounding when there's no actual room tone in between the words. When we speak, even when we stop speaking for a few seconds, there's this underlying room tone, a very low grade hum that's always in the world we're used to hearing. And when you cut that out completely, either by manually cutting things out or by using a gate, you end up with digital silence, and digital silence is very unnatural. So where it's cutting out the breaths here, you can select room tone to put them back in. Now the thing is, I've decided not to reduce this to infinity. I've only gone to -18, so I would not use the room tone in this case. If you were reducing to minus infinity, if you were actually eliminating the breaths completely, I would definitely put the room tone on. Let me give you an example of that with this big breath right here. So let's go to -infinity. We're gonna listen to this breath right here with the room tone off and then on. So here's off.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a...
So there was true digital silence here where that breath should have been. Instead,
very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief, the film was not a...
I have a feeling that you probably didn't hear a difference there. And the truth is, in many cases today, people would not really hear a difference. But if you're listening on really good headphones, on really good monitors, if you're someone who listens to podcasts right in their ears, over the course of a long amount of audio, you would eventually notice it's just something that's just a little wrong. over and over and over and over and over and over again. So that would be the time to do it. Like I said, I don't like eliminating the breaths completely. And so I would do -18 and turn room tone off in this case, and we get this instead.
Very few people took notice. Contrary to popular belief,
To me, it sounds so much more natural to hear the breath, just not nearly as pronounced. That is how you go through the process of dialing in this DeBreath plugin. And the thing is, you need to go through this process every time, because if you record, even if it's just you recording your audio with the same mic in the same location over and over and over, every time you do it, maybe one time you recorded a little bit quieter or a little bit louder, you're an inch closer to the mic than you normally are. That little bit of a difference can completely change how the breaths hit or don't hit these thresholds. You saw earlier how with the energy threshold, all I needed to do was bump it a couple of dB and it completely changed how it accidentally cut off that quiet S sound. So you do have to go through this every time, and yes, it's gonna save you time if you're doing an hour-long episode from having to manually reduce breaths or use volume automation or all these other ways. But it's still a lot of work to get this thing dialed in. I hope that this tutorial was useful. I know that this is an incredibly difficult plugin to work with, and it's one a lot of people seem to want because the other industry standard option is from RX, and the isotope package costs a fortune that comes with DeBreath. It's a very expensive package to get just that one plugin that you want. So people see that Waves has this DeBreath for like 40 bucks or something, and they go, oh, that's so much cheaper than spending, I don't know, $300-400 or whatever it is on this isotope RX package. The problem is the one that Isotope makes is phenomenally easy to use. It basically just does the work for you like everything else Isotope has. The algorithm's amazing. Whereas this is a crude gate-based process that you could pretty much replicate with an expander and an EQ, which I demonstrated in that video I mentioned earlier, which was up there, and it'll be down in the description. Nonetheless, I really hope that this was useful. If it was, hit that like button, comment down below if it was helpful to you. If you have any further questions or any other difficult plugins you've had trouble dialing in you'd like to see a tutorial on, I have a course audio for content creators, which is exactly what it sounds like. Audio 101 for content creators is the name of the course. You'll find that at audio101.info. And I just launched a brand new premium course called Podcasting for Professionals. Any of that you can find at audio101.info. That being said, my name is Brian Miller. Thanks so much for sticking with me. Always remember, our world is a shared experience. Every interaction is meaningful, and every person you meet, even virtually, is important. So come back anytime to sound better and level up, and we'll see you soon.